Ladies and gentlemen, at some point in your life, you were taught that being a good person means saying yes, that keeping the peace means staying silent, that if you truly care about someone, you should always be available, always understanding, always forgiving, always accommodating. And so you did it. You kept showing up. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You tried to be the bigger person. And somewhere along the way, you forgot that you matter too. Today, I want to talk about something that has the power to completely shift your emotional well-being, your relationships, and your sense of self, boundaries, because boundaries are not cold, they're not cruel. They're not walls to keep people out. They are doors that remind you, not everyone gets unlimited access to you. Let's dive in. Some people never raise their voice, never insult you directly, never create a big dramatic scene. In fact, they might even smile a lot, they might be polite, they might tell you they love you, but when you leave their presence, you feel off-tired, a little heavier, a little more unsure of yourself. You can't always put it into words, you just feel it. That's what draining energy looks like. It hides under politeness, it wears the costume of care, but underneath it all, there's something that quietly pulls from you without giving back. It's important to understand this because most people have been conditioned to associate toxic or unhealthy relationships with obvious signs: yelling, manipulation, control, abuse. And while those are very real, there's another kind of energy that can be just as damaging, only it's quiet. It's subtle, and that makes it more dangerous because you can spend years in its presence before realizing it's the very thing making you feel emotionally exhausted. It's the slow leak you don't notice until the tank is empty. You know this kind of energy when it constantly leaves you questioning yourself. You start to doubt your instincts. You shrink your opinions. You hesitate before sharing something good because you're afraid they'll make it about them, or worse, downplay your excitement. It's the kind of energy that doesn't cheer when you win. It doesn't support when you stumble. It just sits there, taking, consuming, hovering. Sometimes this draining energy is disguised as emotional neediness. You're always holding space for their issues. They always need something. They're always in crisis. But when you're the one who's down, suddenly they're busy, distracted, unavailable. It's not about mutual support. It's about one-way emotional labor. And because it doesn't come with direct cruelty, you convince yourself that you're just being a good person for sticking around. You rationalize it by saying they're just going through something, or maybe they don't realize what they're doing. But the truth is, your soul knows. Your energy knows. You walk away from the interaction and something inside you feels unsettled. In other cases, it's the person who plays the victim in every scenario. They always find a way to make themselves the center of pain, even if your pain is the one that needs attention. You could be going through heartbreak, and they'll somehow find a way to make your story about how hard it is for them. These people don't just drain your energy, they rewrite your emotional experiences until you no longer know what's yours and what's theirs. And because it's so sneaky, you might think you're being compassionate by constantly showing up. But what you're actually doing is abandoning yourself in service of someone who has no interest in your emotional needs. And then there's the kind of draining energy that shows up in passive resistance. They never directly tell you they don't believe in you, but they never support you either. They never say you can't do something, but they never encourage you to try. They give backhanded compliments. They play small so you'll stay small. They smile when you talk about your dreams, but deep down they hope you don't succeed, because your success threatens their comfort zone. It doesn't always show up as conflict. Sometimes it shows up as silence, as withdrawal, as subtle sabotage, as emotional unavailability, and that's why it's so hard to walk away, because there's no big, bad moment to point to. Just 1,000 little moments where you felt your light dimming and couldn't explain why. When you're around draining energy, your body starts giving you signals before your mind catches up. You'll feel tired for no reason. You'll get anxious before a phone call. You'll procrastinate replying to their texts. You'll feel heavy before a meetup. That's not you being a bad friend or partner. That's your body warning you about something your mind hasn't dared to face yet. Something about this dynamic is costing you too much. You don't have to wait for someone to do something extreme to give yourself permission to step away. You can leave because it no longer feels good. Because it's too much work, because you've become someone you don't recognize in the process of constantly showing up for them. The truth is, draining energy rarely comes with warning signs. It doesn't wear a mask of evil. It doesn't shout, but it does something far more powerful. It changes you. It quietly robs you of your joy, your motivation, your confidence, your peace. And if you're not paying attention, you'll spend years wondering why life feels so heavy without ever realizing who's been quietly adding weight to your spirit all along. Loyalty is beautiful until it becomes a prison. We're taught from a young age that loyalty is a virtue. We're praised for sticking it out, for standing by someone's side no matter what, ride or die. Family is everything. Real friends don't leave. These phrases get planted in our minds early, and we carry them into adulthood like badges of honor. But what no one teaches us is that loyalty without balance can turn into self-destruction, that sometimes the most loyal thing you can do for yourself is walk away. It's hard to admit that because loyalty feels noble. It makes you feel like the bigger person. You tell yourself you're doing the right thing, the compassionate thing, the strong thing. You stay because you don't want to hurt them. You stay because of how long you've known each other. You stay because you remember how things used to be or how you hoped they'd turn out. But staying doesn't always mean love. Sometimes it just means fear. Fear of change, fear of confrontation, fear of being judged for letting go. But what happens when your loyalty starts costing you your peace? When the very thing you're holding on to is the thing making you anxious, resentful, emotionally numb? That's the part no one talks about. Because loyalty sounds good on paper, but in real life it can look like tolerating mistreatment. It can look like being the only one putting in effort. It can look like constantly compromising your boundaries just to keep someone else comfortable. And here's where it gets even harder. You start to think there's something wrong with you for wanting to leave. You question whether you're being selfish, whether you're giving up too soon, whether you're turning your back on someone who once needed you. But you're not selfish for choosing peace. You're not wrong for wanting a life that feels lighter. You're not disloyal for no longer being willing to carry a relationship that's become one-sided. Loyalty should never require you to abandon yourself. It should never demand that you silence your own needs in order to serve someone else's. True loyalty is mutual. It's respectful. It feels safe, not suffocating. When you're loyal to someone who's also loyal to your well-being, it lifts you. But when you're loyal to someone who takes advantage of that loyalty, it drains you. It traps you in a loop of guilt, obligation, and quiet resentment. Peace isn't always loud. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's as simple as waking up without dread, as simple as not second-guessing every word you say around someone, as simple as feeling like you're allowed to just be you fully, freely, unapologetically. And the people who truly value you will never ask you to sacrifice that version of yourself in order to stay. Sometimes we cling to loyalty because we confuse it with identity. I'm the strong one. I never walk away. I don't quit on people. And while those beliefs might have protected you in the past, they can also keep you trapped in dynamics that no longer serve you. You don't have to keep playing a role just because you've been cast in it for years. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to choose a new story, one where your loyalty includes yourself. This doesn't mean you have to slam doors or burn bridges. Choosing peace doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, it's often quiet. It looks like creating space, setting boundaries, letting the distance speak where words can't. It's not about hating anyone. It's about loving yourself enough to stop proving your loyalty to people who have shown they don't know what to do with it. You can honor the past and still release what's hurting you. You can love someone deeply and still decide they're not good for your mental health. You can feel grateful for the memories while also knowing it's time to write new ones without them. That's not betrayal, that's growth. If you've been staying out of loyalty but losing sleep, losing joy, losing yourself, know that you don't need anyone's permission to walk toward peace. It doesn't matter how long you've known someone, or what you've been through together, or what they might say if you leave. Your peace is reason enough, your sanity is reason enough, the quiet knowing in your gut that something isn't right anymore, that's reason enough. You are allowed to choose peace over history, over guilt, over expectations, over loyalty that only asks for more of you without ever giving anything back. You are allowed to make peace your new loyalty. There's this false narrative that's been passed around for years. The idea that if you set a boundary, you're being rude, cold, or selfish. That saying no makes you difficult. That asking for space means you're heartless. That removing yourself from a draining situation is somehow cruel. But the truth is, boundaries aren't walls, they're not punishments, they're not silent treatments. Boundaries are clarity, boundaries are honesty, boundaries are an expression of self-respect. The reason most people struggle with boundaries isn't because they don't know what they need, it's because they're afraid of how others will react when they honor those needs. We've been taught that kindness means being available at all times. That love means saying yes even when it costs us, that empathy means carrying other people's pain even when we're barely standing ourselves, so we overextend, we people, please, we put ourselves last. And when we finally gather the courage to speak up, we do it with guilt, with apology, as if taking care of ourselves is something we need permission to do. But here's the thing, setting a boundary is not an attack on someone else. It's a declaration to yourself. It says, I value my time, my energy, my emotional space, and I'm not going to sacrifice it just to keep someone else comfortable. It's not about controlling others. It's about knowing your limits and honoring them. It's about recognizing the moments when you're being drained, disrespected, or disregarded, and having the courage to say, this doesn't work for me anymore. A boundary can be as simple as saying, I'm not available for this conversation right now. It can be, I don't feel safe when you speak to me that way. It can be choosing not to answer that call, not to show up to that dinner, not to keep trying to fix a relationship where you're the only one showing up. And while other people may not always like it, especially if they benefited from your lack of boundaries before, it doesn't make your boundary wrong. It makes it necessary. People who genuinely care about you will respect your boundaries. They may not understand them right away. They may even feel hurt at first, but over time, they'll see that your boundary is not a rejection of them. It's a reflection of your commitment to your own emotional health. And those who push back, the ones who call you selfish or distant or dramatic, those are often the people who were relying on your silence to continue crossing the line. One of the hardest parts of setting boundaries is unlearning the guilt. We're so used to giving unlimited access to our time and our energy that the moment we say enough, we question ourselves. But guilt is not a compass. Guilt often shows up when we start choosing ourselves in ways we've never done before. And just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. The truth is, you can love people and still set limits with them. You can be compassionate without being a doormat. You can show up for others without abandoning yourself in the process. In fact, the healthiest version of you, the most loving, present, emotionally available version, only exists when you are protecting your boundaries. Because when you're constantly overextending, constantly saying yes when you mean no, constantly suppressing your needs just to avoid discomfort, resentment builds. You start to feel invisible in your own life. And eventually you disconnect, not just from others, but from yourself. Boundaries are not the end of love. They are the beginning of respect. Respect for yourself, respect for your values, respect for the kind of life you're trying to build. A life where your peace matters, where your emotional space is protected, where your energy is not up for negotiation. And no, you don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. You don't have to justify protecting your mental health. You don't need to convince someone to understand what feels right for you. The people who are meant to be in your life won't need endless reminders that your boundaries are rooted in self-respect, not cruelty. So let's stop apologizing for drawing the line. Let's stop confusing sacrifice with love. Let's stop treating burnout like it's a badge of honor. You were never meant to live in a constant state of emotional overdrive just to be liked, accepted, or loved. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to say, "This is what I need." And I'm no longer ignoring that to make someone else feel okay. That's not cruelty. That's growth. So if you've been carrying the weight of guilt for protecting your peace, let it go. If you've been shrinking to keep others comfortable, it's time to expand. And if you've been waiting for someone to give you permission to draw the line, you don't need it anymore. You are not cruel for having limits. You are not selfish for putting your well-being first. You are simply remembering who you are and choosing to honor that. The relationships that are meant for you will not only survive your boundaries, they will respect them. Because boundaries aren't the end of connection. They are the beginning of healthy ones. Choose your peace, stand in your truth, and never apologize for valuing yourself enough to protect it. Thank you.